And I'll play E-Dog. He's a longtime supporter of my channel. And I'm going to play E4. Let's try to make this more tactical. Okay, another modern. Another modern, so we're going to play it exactly the same way that we played the last game. Bishop to E3. Okay, this is literally exactly the same. This time, let's play H4 immediately. It doesn't really matter the order in which we play H4, as long as we play it at some point. And he actually responds in exactly the same way. So this is all the same. This is literally all the same as that first game we played. And remember that in this position, ultimately, black wants to develop his bishop to B7, which is why we want to play the move F3. We want to buttress and reinforce the pawn so we don't have to worry about it. And so that when the bishop appears on B7, it's not actually immediately attacking the pawn. Now, can somebody remind me in this position? Somebody remind me in this position, what is the key maneuver that we play as a consequence of him weakening a certain square? So, gigahertz, for now, I'm going to not develop the bishop at all. I don't need to yet. Let's see what he does, and then we will decide where to put the bishop. We can also fianchetto the bishop. That's not out of the question. But we don't need to worry about it yet. Whoa! Sky bobbles another 500 bits. Girl. Yeah, knight g5. Absolutely. And we might play this a little bit differently from that other game, just to show you guys the range of ideas we may have. Now, what's on the docket for us here? Oh my god. Oh, okay. I just got baited. That's 500 bucks right there. Okay. So basically, nice one, Sadat. What should we do now? In the name of flexibility, between castling and developing the bishop, which of these should we prefer? And actually there's this, ooh, I want to show you guys a really interesting idea. In terms of developing this bishop, as I explained the first time, when we play bishop d3, we sever our contact with the d4 pawn. So we facilitate the move c5. We make it stronger. When we castle, what happens is, he plays c5, we can take on c5, and our control over the d-file has been increased, which discourages him from playing c5. But there is a third idea that we can play. I'm going to tell you guys the first move, and I want you to tell me the second. And I'm going to give you a hint. It's not bishop g2. Where the hell is the bishop actually? Yeah. What are we preparing with this move? What are we, like, insinuating? This is not a move that I'm necessarily going to play, but it's a move that he's now going to have to reckon with for the rest of the game. $5,005. Oh my god. That yeah, sacrifice on e6. Absolutely. We might sack on e6, break through his center, and then win the bishop on g7. That might be an idea. And I want to make it very clear that we're not necessarily going to do it on the next move. Or if we don't, the idea has failed. In fact, we can even make it stronger. So let's calculate. Bishop e6 takes. Knight takes e6, attack his queen. The problem is he moves his queen. And then when we play knight takes g7, he goes king f7. I'll show this after the game. The knight is going to be trapped. So let us prepare the idea of bishop takes e6. How can we do that? How can we prepare bishop takes e6? You guys are already familiar with this move because we played it in the last game. Well, d5, he goes e5. Yeah, knight f4. Knight f4 increases the pressure on the pawn. Remember that that's why we played knight e2. The knight is on its ideal square. Notice that we haven't even castled yet. We haven't needed to. The king is perfectly fine in the center for now. If he finds a way to defend against this stuff, fine. Then we're going to castle. But right now, we're prioritizing the immediate attack. We want to just checkmate him here. Okay. Okay. So, like, yeah. Whoa, I mean, if he goes f5, already beer. Oh, this pawn is going to be dead meat. It's going to be toast. So, he has, I'm not going to say the best move. I mean, his best move is knight f8. His best move is knight f8, which is a very nasty move to play because it defeats his ability to castle. Let me tell you guys, he cannot allow knight takes c6. That would be a total disaster. That's right, Flyerton. That would be the second best move, let's just say. But allowing knight takes c6 is just absolute devastation. Zactics, I don't think there is a most people. I think you can run some statistics, but everybody is completely different. No. E-Dog doesn't stream snipe. This guy's honorable. But just in case. But he's very honorable. He doesn't stream snipe. And I don't hold it against people if they stream snipe. With a speedrun, that would be fine. So, I mean, oh my god. Okay, knight f8. Now, what is the idea of knight f8? What does that move accomplish? What that accomplishes is it defends e6. It defends e6, so if we take on e6 twice, he's going to take back, and we're not going to have a knight any longer. So let's just develop our pieces by castling. No, I think he just found it. I mean, that's a findable move. That's definitely a findable move. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, guys, E-Dog is... I'm not going to have shade thrown on him. So, why do I castle? Because we're patient here. We're not rushing with any sacrifices. We're just increasing the pressure by completing our development. Okay. So now we need to find a way to increase that pressure. But we can actually procrastinate in a good way on that task. We can procrastinate in a good way on the task. Chess procrastination involves playing a healthy waiting move. When we castle, we already talked at length about what kind of move that may be. So what is that healthy waiting move? King b1, yep. So he takes, but now his dark squares are really weak. Yes, he makes this move less likely. But look at all these dark squares that he's weakened by giving up his main bishop. Okay, he's attacking this pawn. We can't defend it directly, but we can move this knight away. Where should we move it? We should move it toward the center so that it remains relevant. And now our strategy should be to open up the position. When our opponent gives up a very important piece that supervises so many squares, it's really important to open up the position in order to be able to take advantage of those squares. Now, I know a lot of you guys at this point are thinking either e5 or d5, but we got to be careful about these moves because he can just go forward. If we go e5, he's going to go d5. If we go d5, he's going to go e5. There is a third way to open up the position. Yeah, so we could play f4, f5. That's one good idea. That's actually a great idea, but c3 would be another. c3 would be another way to open up the position. Okay, which way should we take? Bit of a trick question. How should we take? Let's think. Think. C takes. C takes d3. Excuse me, 2 reasons. Sorry. Wrong passageway. 2 reasons. What do we open up? Look at the center we create. Look at how we're now defending the e-pawn. C file, beautiful file. We don't even need to occupy it. But guess what? We can. Let's employ this rook on the c file. Where does the other rook belong? Where does the other rook belong? Wrong tube, yeah. In Russian, you say wrong throat. It belongs in the f file. Why does it belong in the f file? Because once we play f5, we're going to stomp on his position. Crunch! Boom, boom, bing, bang, pow. Bing, bang, pow. Bing, bang, boom. And now, what are we going to take on f5 with? Another trick question. Don't rush. If we were to play this creatively, Dania style, we want to take with a rook. Because we want to preserve this bishop as the main attacker. Look at how his king is completely caught in the crossfire. Now we want to try to find avenues to his king. What can we use to get to his king? Well, we already have a rook on c1. That's a natural thing to follow up on. We just need to enhance the attack on the pawn on c7. So the move is bishop f4. Bingo. Now I look at this knight on h7 and I say, it's a type 2 undefended piece. Only the rook is defending the knight. Can we attack that rook using the piece that we just improved? Yeah, there's so many possible moves here. I don't want to create the impression that there's only one way of winning this. I mean, okay. Now we ask ourselves, what squares have been left behind as a result of this trade? What can we now do? Absolutely. Queen c5. And then rook c6. Sexy moves here. His knight is lost and he gets checkmated. Boom. And it's mate in 2. His king literally has no escape. Checkmate. That's how you... Oh, that was a rated game. Oh, okay. I thought, for example, for some reason I was on my normal account. But yeah, that's a nice game. That's a nice game. Good game. Okay. So that's why the Modern is such a hard opening to play. The Modern is very hard to play because you have to deal with all of these weak squares, right? And this idea of g3 bishop h3 is super common. I've seen it before. I'm sure I can find games right off the bat where this has been applied. This is almost an indistinguishable game from my game against Edog. Another sub, Zora. Okay, so literally, similar line. This is actually not my game against Edog. This is literally another game. G3, King B1, B3 to stop knight C4, Bishop H3, Knight E2, Knight F4. Literally move by move, same ideas. Now, Black managed to castle long here. Black got his king safe, but that doesn't diminish the sort of the strength of this idea, really. And in the game, White opens up the game with D5. He opens up these files, and White went on to a crushing victory. White just has complete dominance over the position, and White won the game in the end. So the point of Bishop H3 is to increase the pressure on the E6 pawn. That doesn't necessarily mean we will definitely sacrifice on E6, but when you increase the pressure on something, you force your opponent to worry about it. Force your opponent to allocate resources to its defense, and that raises the likelihood that your opponent will end up being weak on other sides of the board. This is a game between an international master, as you guys could see, in a 2200. Now, why didn't I take on E6? The reason I didn't take on E6 is because if you extend the line, if you calculate the line, after knight G7, king F7, this knight is actually trapped. And if we try to defend this knight with bishop H6, Black has a really sexy move that that dislodges the bishop from H6. I still think White is much better here. I think White might be winning. But in light of the next move, things get very complicated, and I just didn't see a need to do that. Yeah, knight G8. Good job, guys, considering the retreating moves. Now, this does allow queen F4 check, but now the other knight comes to F6. This gets super complex. Okay? So that's why we patiently played knight F4. Castles, bishop H6, king B1 improving the position. And now, well, bishop E6 here, Ezra. I'm not sure what you would accomplish here. I mean, there's no bishop on G7 to capture. And, you know, I'm not sure exactly what you would gain from this. I mean, White could go D5 to establish the knight on E6. But I don't think that's the... Whoa! Gem 10! Let's get that hype going. Appreciate it, Gem 10 gifted to the community. As I continue coughing. Need some water. Thank you so much, Gem. Let's go. The train has left the station. Basically, knight C3 defending the pawn, and now several ways of opening the position. It really went down the wrong tube. Now, C3 is my favorite way of doing that because it attacks B4. And this is another application of the principle I have been emphasizing. Whoa, Edog 3650. My gracious opponent gifting 3 subs to the community, to King Joe 420, Jung Hash Brown, and I'm Brian Lefebvre. My pleasure, man. Thank you for the gifted. Appreciate your support. Why does it not matter that we've opened up the B file? What principle allows us to immediately understand that this is not dangerous for White? Like, how do I know that? How do I know that this is not dangerous for me? Yeah, no pieces. First of all, White has all these pieces massed together. Second of all, yeah, I can even play rook h2. Second of all, Black has no pieces on the queen side. Black can't pull an attack out of his behind. I mean, you need pieces on the queen side. Black is way too bogged down with all of his weaknesses to ever really even dream of a sustained attack. And that's a very important thing to realize. No pieces and all talk. So F4 is what we did in the game, and now CD. Opening the C file, beefing up the security of our central pawns. That's what's important here, not the optical sort of appeal of our center. In fact, if you learn to look at this the right way, this should actually look better than taking with the queen, which would not be bad. This isn't like a super significant decision. This would actually facilitate f5. So a case could be made for queen takes d3. But CD, I think, is a little sexier because we don't need to rush to prepare f5. Now f5. And now we can take with the bishop, but this is even stronger. Rook takes, preserving the bishop. Twisting the knife in, putting the bishop on e5, attacking the rook. And now asking ourselves, okay, what squares are now accessible to our pieces? Noticing queen g5, and then finishing off the pressure on the knight with the rook c6, leading into checkmate. Well, it depends on the weaknesses that you create, Captain Jesus. Right? If you're worried about getting lobster pincered, then don't play g6, right? Because then your opponent could put a bishop on f6. You need to understand whether there are ways of making Luft that don't create as many weaknesses. Okay. Wow. Are you? I think you should ask that to Charlie. Yeah, I think we should reserve that question for Charlie. All right. So that concludes any questions about this game. Well, I mean, I think Black's last chance. I wouldn't take here. I would play something like. Actually, maybe I would. I would try to castle long here. Maybe go queen d7. Actually, maybe even castle short. Although here I would go g4 to open up the h file. Schwarzschild, you asked that before. I'm not sure exactly what do you mean with kh3. I never put a king on h3, so if you mean bishop h3, then I explained it, I think, in sufficient detail. The idea is to sacrifice on e6, increase the pressure on the pawn. Can you elaborate on why rook f5? Well, basically, it's all about understanding what the best attackers are. This position is so winning that either move is good. But rook f5, I think, is even better because this bishop is a super valuable attacker. And the fact that I sacrifice in exchange shouldn't deter you because look at just the visual superiority of my pieces over Black's pieces. And look how important this bishop is. This bishop ties itself to the knight. It controls all of these squares. And it basically is responsible for this being checkmate. If this bishop weren't here, the king would be able to escape. So I was able to basically understand that I was so close to delivering checkmate, the bishop would be a very significant piece in the attack, if that makes sense. It's stronger than both of Black's rooks. Black's rooks are just staring at pawns. It's hard for me to explain that at a level that perhaps is concrete enough, but that's basically the logic, if that makes sense. Well, it's hard to see, but it's all about not assuming things, right? When you assume, oh, I need to capture with the bishop, then you don't allow your brain to process these kinds of things. And to me, this is where intuition comes in. This is where experience comes in, right? I'm able to just judge this immediately because I've attacked like this so many times that that to me there's no doubt in my mind that this is completely winning. Okay, Witten's... Well, I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce that. Okay, who's Spiridov playing? Oh, he's playing Bullet. Okay, let's go d4. Let's go d4. Yeah, let's go with a Queen's Gambit. Okay, so Queen's Gambit accepted. Now, it's LaCroix. What is the purpose of the Queen's Gambit? What is like the natural follow-up to sacrificing this pawn? So what's like the obvious follow-up to this? Like you sack the pawn to get the center. Now e4 is not the only move. And there's also a drawback with e4, which is that you get your pawns to the center, but you don't have any pieces developed yet. So this is actually one of the moves that is considered to be the main move. And now there's a lot of theory here, but the main move is to go knight f3, develop the knight and support the pawn. Taking on e5 leads to an undesirable queen trade. Okay, so bishop b4, bishop d2, this is theory. And what ends up happening here is you end up sacrificing the d4 pawn. You capture the c pawn, but you get a big lead in development. So white is going to have 3 pieces developed, black is going to have 0. But black takes the d4 pawn. So now, at the end of the day, black is up a pawn, but we've got a lead in development. I actually don't know the theory of this too well. But I think we will be able to reconstruct what we're supposed to do here. So in such positions, I think it's a good idea to not overthink it and just continue developing. There's no need to do anything crazy. So if we were to just continue developing, what would that look like? Yeah, we could consider going queen b3, but he could also defend that pawn with queen e7. I'm not sure that's worth it. Let's just castle. Let's just castle. And let's see how he positions his pieces. That way we'll be able to make a more informed decision about what to do. Okay, so bishop e6. We can take the bishop and weaken his king slightly. I think that makes sense. And then we can go queen b3. We can also keep the tension with a move like rook c1. I do like the idea of taking. Let's take here. Okay, he's taking his time on f takes e6. All right. And then we have two pawns, both of which are undefended. So let's go queen b3 and attack both of them. And he can defend both of them with queen c8, but then his queen becomes passive. Yeah, queen d7 is the move. Okay, so obviously I think most people here would be like, okay, why not queen takes b7? Then he goes rook b8. We go queen a6, and maybe he takes back on b2. But the end result of that is that the b file gets opened. And who benefits from the b file getting opened? Who benefits from that ultimately? Ultimately, it's of course white. It's white because black is not castled yet. So when one side isn't castled, open files generally benefit the side that has that lead in development. Okay, let's go rook a c1. Let's put the rook on c1. Okay, attacking the knight, trying to get the knight to move. If the knight moves, we win a7. So rook b6 is probably what he's going to play. Okay, now where should we move the queen? Where should we move the queen here? What should we do? Yeah, so queen a3 prevents him from castling. Queen a3 prevents him from castling. So I like the idea of going queen a3. Now, he could go queen e7, but then maybe we shift the queen up to a4 and attack the knight. So we were trying to like get him to not castle. We're trying to exploit the fact that we have castled and our opponent has not. I think that white is better here. And we're trying to milk that as much as possible. If we just let him castle, then he would complete his development. Okay, well, this looks very dubious because now he permanently cannot castle. And now our goal is to improve the positioning of our pieces and to simply nurture the initiative. So what comes to mind in that regard? How can we activate our pieces? Like, what ideas can we come up with here? So one idea is to go knight c4 and attack his rook. But I actually like a slightly different plan here. What I like is the idea of doubling rooks on the c-file. Now, why do I like that? The reason I like that is because I want you guys to take a good hard look at this knight on c6. Okay, this knight is not defended by any pawns. Let's get this the heck out of there. This knight is not defended by any pawns, which means if we pile up the pressure on that knight is very likely to end up in super serious trouble. If that knight moves, then we take on c7. So we're basically keeping knight c4 in our back pocket until the time is ripe for that, if it makes sense. As I say, it's a pressure point, exactly. Okay, so we have many ways now of attacking the knight. We can go queen a4, but we don't really want to trade queens. I don't want to do that. But now the move knight c4 is a whole lot stronger than it was previously, although knight c4, maybe rook b5 is kind of annoying. So let me think for a second. How do we want to do this? How do we want to play this? Let me think for a second. How do we want to play this position? Well, knight e5, he'll take it. And we don't necessarily want to help him absolve himself of that weakness. I'm thinking. Yeah, knight g5 is interesting. Okay, let's go. Okay, let's go queen a4. Let's go queen a4. And what I'm basically going to say is that, yes, his knight is going to move, but even in the endgame, oh, this is a really good move, though. This is a really good move. But we can just take here. And what my point is that even in the endgame, the initiative continues. This is a point that is often very misunderstood by people. You can trade queens and still be attacking. That's not illegal. Okay, you can absolutely trade queens and still be attacked. So what should we do now? We can actually win some material. We can play knight takes e5. And we have two pieces for a rook. I'll explain the complications after the game. But basically, two pieces for a rook is good for us. And in terms of the pawn count, we also have equal pawns. So right now what's going on here is we're attacking d4, we're attacking c7. We need to consolidate our pieces, make sure this passed pawn doesn't go anywhere. But look at the piece activity we have. We have now the rook on the 7th rank. The rook can mow down some of these pawns. We're basically going to play for checkmate here. And we're going to have to be very careful in how we actually orchestrate that. Because if we go knight takes d4, he goes rook takes f2. This guy is super, super good. He's actually kind of tricked me a little bit here. Let me think. Well, d4 hanging, but yeah. This guy is super annoying. Let me think. Yeah. I had a bad feeling about this one. Okay, let's go knight c6. Let's go knight c6, and let's play for checkmate. I'll explain what I'm doing after the game. I'll explain what I'm doing, like, fully after the game. Okay, now we're going to go here. We're going to take on d4. That was the main idea of knight c6. To take the pawn on our own terms. Okay, now we're going to go here and attack this pawn with our... Oh my god, I blundered. Oh god, I blundered a piece. Yeah, he's going to win this one. That's going to be our first loss. Yeah, I had a feeling this guy was going to beat me. Completely winning position too for white, but that's going to be our first loss. Yeah, this guy somehow found a way out of that situation. Yeah, it's that kind of an evening. I could just feel it. Let me try to come back from this if you guys let me focus. Let me try. Well, this is completely hopeless. Down in exchange. Just blundered a piece in one move. Yeah, I'm not sure like exactly what we could have done. This guy's playing just super, super well. This guy is playing super well. No chances here. Just not leaving me a single chance. Interesting. Okay. Taking a while on rook h4. Yeah, he's got so much time. Yeah, okay, but you can count that as a loss. That's just some magic I pulled, but you can count that as basically a loss. Okay. Okay, I mean, I am, you know, I have, you know, I have to put the foot down sometimes. Okay. I have to put the foot down sometimes. That was weird. I felt like we were winning, but somehow he got out of it. It was really like hard to find the actual final blow. It was really weird. I'm usually good in these positions, but I was not able to like find anything specific. He played unbelievably well. I'll check the accuracies. And legitimately, obviously, don't take this the wrong way. I'm just curious where the win was. Well, 95% for me, 94.9 for me, and 84.3 for him. So we still played very well. I really only made one mistake this entire game, which was the blunder. I literally made one mistake, which was the blunder. That was the only mistake we made in this entire game. Everything else was best. Every single other move was best. So in a certain sense, justice was served. He had made in one. I don't think he did. So I made this one blunder, and that should have decided the game. Okay, so basically, let's go over the game. Now, this was a Queen's Gambit. It was well played by him, but it was completely winning for white until the blunder. That's what I'm saying. Well, because I blundered a piece. I'll explain it, guys. So knight f3, you take... So this opening is very theoretical. There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to unpack here, and I don't want to delve too deeply into the theory. Basically, yeah, this is the Queen's Gambit accepted. And what the battle revolves around is, well, first of all, black can try to cling to the pawn of b5. This is a legitimate line. But the problem with this entire setup is that this pawn chain, with the pawn on b5, pawn on c4, is not sustainable. And white is able to chip away at this pawn chain by force. And this pawn chain just isn't able to be sustained. So how does white do that? How, using the principle of attacking the base of the pawn chain, we go a4, black goes c6. If black goes a6, then at the end of the day, he drops the rook. So black has to go c6. But the problem here is that after a, b, c, b, white goes knight c3. White goes knight c3, and it's actually very hard to defend this pawn. If black pushes the pawn, then we can pick it off with queen a4, queen takes b4. If black goes a6, this is actually a legitimate variation. There is a variation here where you sack the exchange, but not everybody knows it. What do we do here with white? That was a very lucky game. Yeah, knight b5 is correct. And believe it or not, there is a line where black actually sacrifices the exchange and then plays bishop takes e4. This is actually a legitimate variation where black gets compensation for the exchange, but white is still supposed to be better here. If white knows what to do here, white gets an advantage. So this line does exist, but that's how white reacts if black tries to cling to the pawn. So most of black's strategies revolve around putting immediate pressure on white's center. And the reason he does that is because white hasn't developed his pieces yet. If black lets white develop his pieces, then you're not going to have the opportunity to attack white's center. That should be kind of reasonable to you guys. So e5 is part of that strategy. Okay, so d takes e5 here allows black to take the queen, and white loses his castling rights. And the pawn count is equal, so this is no good for white. That's why you go knight f3, bishop b4 check. So d5 is not that good because you kind of close down the center. And this is a variation. This is a legitimate line. But black can get this blockading square on d6. Black just gets a very solid position. Like, this isn't bad. But by closing up the center, white reduces the effect, let's say, of his space advantage. And black gets nice blockade here. You know, the square in front of an important pawn, if it's controlled by the opponent, that's kind of not a great thing, if that makes sense. Yeah, of course. So, well, the benefits of accepting the gambit, I mean, this is a very legitimate line for black. I mean, black doesn't get a bad position here if he's very careful. Okay, so takes. Somebody asked a question about queen a4, but this is a check, so we have to deal with that. Yeah, knight c3 is also a move. Like, all of this is theoretical. But the problem with knight c3 is it allows this bishop to remain ensconced on b4. And one thing that could end up happening is black could be using this pin to his advantage. So I'm not exactly sure how, but maybe c5. Bishop d2 is more forceful, right? You are removing the only black piece that is developed currently. And right now we get the situation. This is a theoretical position. White's got 3 pieces developed, black has 0. White has full compensation for the pawn. But if black is careful, black should not be worse here. So I'm not sure exactly where my opponent went wrong, but somewhere around here, he made a bad move. And he goes bishop e6, which allows us to soften up the position around his king. Also, this pawn is very weak. This pawn is very weak. So we combine the two observations and we go queen b3. My opponent decided to sacrifice the pawn on b7. I think that was the main mistake. This is the sort of position where if you are already accepting the queen's gambit, You know, that Russian expression, having said A, you have to say B. If you're already accepting the gambit, then you might as well cling to the pawn. You might as well suffer for a pawn. So queen c8, I think, is a better move. But in a position like this, I think white's got very nice pressure for the pawn. Like, I think from a human perspective, this is a very pleasant position for white. There's also ideas like knight g5 here in the air, and rook takes c6 ideas as well. So I really like these positions for white. I think these positions are suitable to my style. But our opponent gives up b7, and he doesn't recapture b2. And the reason why is that he's just way too underdeveloped here. What would white do in this position? What is an example of some of the moves that white could play here to sort of develop the initiative? And one thing to remember, if you go rook b1, black has kind of an annoying move, rook back to b6. In my opinion, this is kind of annoying. And if you take on b6, black closes down the b file. So what you would want to do first is go knight c4 to take away the b6 square. And only after the rook drops back would you want to play rook a to b1. Now you're winning the battle over the b file. The rook has no good squares, no good safe squares to park itself on the b file. And if black ignores, this knight on c6 you guys should already be aware of, right? This knight is very vulnerable. This knight is also defending the rook, which means the knight is overloaded. What is a very simple way to take advantage of this overloaded knight? And that is to play... Well, queen c6 is very creative, but then you sacrifice the queen, and if you actually calculate out the line, at the end of it, black actually recaptures the knight, so it's less clear, but the simplest is knight e5. Yeah, knight e5 is correct, attacking the queen. If black takes, then you actually win both rooks. So something like this could be the consequence of him taking, so he quickly decides to develop. But in this position, black is in big trouble. He can't castle. His position's very flimsy. Now rook c5 is really good. Now, why did I not play knight c4? I know most people wanted to do this. Well, the bottom line reason, and you've got to be very careful about overestimating these kinds of moves, right? The problem with this move is that it closes down the c file. It blocks our own biggest asset, which is our c file. So I wanted to keep this idea in my pocket. The threat is stronger than its execution. That expression explains a lot of the choices that I'm making here. I'm trying to build up the pressure so that when I do play knight c4, it's actually a lot stronger. I'm also not sure. Maybe I don't want to play knight c4. Maybe I will want to play queen a4, which is what happened in the game. The knight on d2 also has the utility of defending the e4 pawn. So you don't want to rush with these kinds of tempting moves. Very important, in my opinion. Maintaining all control, exactly. That's well said. So knight g4 is just useless. Now we double rooks. And now queen a4 is the best move, actually, because it attacks the knight, forces the knight to move. He moves it to e5, which was kind of a fancy move. But no, I wasn't, because he has no way to attack the rook. He has no actual way to attack the rook. If you were to look at his knights, can his knights even hypothetically attack the rook? No. So, not really. Knight e5 is fancy, but at the end of the day, it's the same effect as a move like knight b8. Obviously, we cannot take the knight because we drop our queen. So queen takes d7, and knight e5 is also correct. And basically, at the end of the day, now this is something we need to unpack for a second. He takes knight fd7. A lot of people got confused here. Now, okay, queen d1 is a super computerish move. This is not a human move at all. To drop the queen back is pretty crazy. I think queen d7 is fine. Why rook c5 rather than rook c2? Well, rook c5 is just a more active move. Okay, rook c2 also could run into this. So rook c5 is more stable, and it's more active. And also, the rook also controls the e5 square. So this is just objectively the best square for the rook. Now, basically, you need to, in these positions when there's a lot going on, you need to break down exactly which pieces are hanging. And that helps you get, not as mystified about the complexities of the position. So if we are to actually list out all of the stuff that's hanging. From white's perspective, only the rook and the pawn. The knight on f3 is not hanging. It is protected by the knight and the pawn. From black's perspective, black has three things that are hanging. The knight, the pawn, and the other pawn. So we can take c7. And if we calculate this line out, yes, taking c7 is okay. But then after knight takes f3, knight takes f3, and rook takes b2, material is equal. And now if we are to take the other thing that's hanging, which is the d4 pawn, and we are to reevaluate the position, what does black have here? What nasty move now becomes possible as a consequence of the rook appearing here. And that's also a very important thing to do. You have to update your perception of the position. What was once not hanging can now be hanging. Rook takes f2, pig a's on the 7th. Black has a big chance to deliver perpetual or even more. So in general, 2 pieces for a rook benefits the 2 pieces. But also, if you just compare the activity of the 2 knights versus the activity of the rooks, just visually speaking, the knights are running circles over these rooks. And black's got all these weak pawns. So I just determined that, okay, I'm probably going to win a bunch of black's pawns, and I'm probably going to win the game here. Also, the king is very weak. King could literally get checkmated in these positions. So anyways, he started hunting after my pawns. I started hunting after his. And the critical moments, so knight c6. Now, why did I play this move? Gilmatic, thank you. Again, if we are to take on d4, we blunder the pawn on f2. So I played knight c6 because I potentially wanted to take the pawn with this knight. And also I wanted to involve my other knight to g5 or e5 and literally deliver some sort of a checkmate. Okay, I literally wanted to go for checkmate. And I was doing it all successfully up until this point. So I checked the computer. I now know what the best move was. And the best move was to go after this e-pawn, which I did. But I did it in the wrong way. I forgot that this knight was now overloaded. This knight is classic overloaded, defending 2 things at once. And he takes on d4. And instead, I had a tactical way of going after this pawn, which... again, bears the same idea as rook e7. And it's a tactical move. So we actually directly attack this pawn. Who can find it? It's a very pretty idea. It's knight to d8. Yeah, it's knight to d8. Are we blundering the knight? No, we're not. Because this is a fork against the king and the rook. So we win the game. We win the rook in the game. And if he doesn't do anything, then we simply take on e6 and we just take all of his pawns. We've got a devastating attack. So this is just winning. This is a super nice move, and it's not easy to see on demand, but this was the fastest way to win the game. Definitely a 5-head move. But instead, rook e7, rook d4, and just like that, all of the effort has evaporated, and white is lost. That's the brutality. That's the reality of chess. Like you do everything perfectly, and then you play one very bad move, and then you're busted. You're just down an exchange and a pawn. And it's only through a literal miracle that I was able to win. He kept taking like 10 seconds to move. And somehow I managed to flag him. But for all intents and purposes, that was a loss. Well, I did take... Higara, if I take the rook with the knight, then he takes my rook. That's sort of the point of putting the rook on e7. Why it's bad. It's putting it in the crosshairs of the king. And that is that game. Yeah, a lot of stuff that happened. But hopefully I managed to paint the general picture of things that happened. So anyways, that's what happened.